From probably the best DPS in the game 1.4 to one of the worst in over a year, Jingliu has finally gotten some buffs that she really desperately needed. Let's quickly go over her changes. Jingliu now completely scales off HP, and instead of giving herself a massive attack boost during the transmigration state, she gives herself a massive 220% crit damage boost. She now can also hold up to 4 stacks of syzygy, and the nice quality of life buff is that after teammates lose or have their HP consumed 20 times, Jingliu will gain 1 stack of syzygy for free. So just like Blade, she's quite reliant on Hyoscene S1 now, and she can pretty much stay in the transmigration state permanently. Another nice damage boost to the kit at E0 is that when Jingliu has maximum stacks, Jingliu's next attack will ignore 25% defense. On top of that, instead of an action advance after using her skill, which was completely used before because she was speed tuned to -1, she now regenerates extra energy. I found this to help Jingliu get a 2-turn ultimate with Sunday fairly consistently. She just needs to take 1 or 2 hits in between or maybe defeat some enemies. I think one of the bigger criticisms of Jingliu's buff is that she can no longer make use of Robin, but when comparing a team of Robin and Hohua to 3B and Hyoscene post buff, Jingliu actually more than doubles her damage, from a very puny 13k DPAV to now almost 30,000 damage per action value. Pretty close to 3.x DPS units right now in terms of just raw damage output. At E0S1, the buffs are actually mostly satisfactory for me. Her multipliers are pretty good now, especially for a HP scaling unit, and the fact that you can regenerate syzygy means she will almost never have that awkward downtime where she has to rebuild stacks and lose a ton of damage in the process. Overall, she feels a lot better to play, especially with Hyoscene S1. The issue I kind of have is that I'm almost always capped out on syzygy stacks and I can't really do anything more with it. Like maybe if Jingliu gets additional rest pen or damage boost based on the number of stacks active or something, then Jingliu can at least make better use of it. For the last few changes, her E1, E4 and E6 were slightly changed. E1 actually got a massive buff. She gains more crit damage than before, but she now also always deals the extra single target damage to the primary target. 80% additional damage is a lot, by the way, considering the new primary multipliers are 150% and 180% respectively. It's a really nice buff and probably one of the biggest changes in the kit. In gameplay, this allowed me to reduce the clear time by 2 to 3 cycles, which is pretty crazy considering some of the enemies don't even have ice weakness. The E4 change I thought was pretty weird at first glance, but in calculation it still does pretty well. She already has a ton of crit damage from a new talent, like she can already have up to 600% crit damage with Sunday, and now E4 gives her an additional 100% crit damage on top of that. Somehow it's still a great DPAV increase and one of her better Eidolons. Finally, E6 increases max syzygy stacks to 5, and she gains 2 stacks in addition to the 1 from the talent, meaning she starts at maximum stacks instantly. However, I can't see this being very useful because even pre-E6 I can already consistently keep Jingliu at the maximum of 4 stacks. So even if I have 5 max stacks now, there's really no point, it doesn't do anything for her. This would have been more useful for pre-buff Jingliu because she can actually run out of syzygy, but I have never once run out of stacks playing with post-buff Jingliu. I guess it can be useful if you don't have Hyoscene S1, but this is E6 we're talking about, right? What are the chances you don't have Hyoscene S1 at that point? The better buff is the 30% rest pen. 3B already provides 24%, but more rest pen is always welcome and the biggest damage boost for all her Eidolons, most likely because there is less diminishing returns. I happen to have some old Jingliu calcs from 2024 and it's pretty funny because even base E0 now outperforms E6 Jingliu but with a different team. So in terms of a buff, I think it's definitely a huge success. Maybe my standards are a bit too high coming off of Finon, but I still don't really like that she overcaps so much on crit damage. It could have been so much better if it was invested into some other stat. So anyways, for my final verdict, just like Blade, I think she is a pretty solid tier 1 on average for Memory of Chaos and Apocalyptic Shadow. If it's a 3 target stage with Ice weakness, she might even be able to push up to 0.5. In Pure Fiction, however, she has less AoE damage than Blade, but still decent enough to clear, especially since she can now use 3B and Hyoscene, both who have really good AoE. Probably a 1 to 1.5 or maybe even lower, especially since the Herta and Mini Herta exist. But if you have E1, Jingliu becomes a different beast. She can and will outperform some other 3.x DPS units at times, and is also now much better at 1 to 2 target scenarios that she previously would struggle with. At this investment level, I think Jingliu is really good and is at the bare minimum tier 0.5 for Memory of Chaos and Apocalyptic Shadow. The extra single target damage doesn't really do a whole lot for Pure Fiction, so it's still pretty similar. Okay, review over, let's go over builds. Firstly, light cones, I found pretty similar results in general. Melis S1 is now the best, beating out her own signature light cone by 7%, which really hurts. The pretty cool part about Melis S1 though is that it consumes her own HP as well, which means more syzygy stacks in the longer run. Unreachable Sight surprisingly performs very well, even though the crit rate is very hard to use and you can't even use the damage boost. I guess it goes to show how good extra HP percentage is. on Jingliu now. S5 Ninja Record is a really good free-to-play light clone for the same reason, only 14% behind Midday S1. And finally, the new Meta Pass light clone at S3 performs at a very similar level, but just like Blades S1, the crit rate is very hard to use and can make building Jingliu harder, hence why I don't think it's as good. For Bone Collection versus Rotitan, it was actually really close. Both extra damage and HP sources are super useful for Jingliu now, and this shows even in the main stat comparisons because a HP orb is actually really close to an ice damage orb. I think part of this is also because Hyacinth and 3B are on the team, who will deal slightly more damage if Jingliu has more HP. The crit damage and Ice Orb build now does the worst, probably because we already have too much crit damage. Lastly, for teams, I already kind of mentioned it earlier, but Jingliu's best team is now Sunday, 3B and Hyacinth with S1. I found RMC replacing 3B to be decent as well, but it's much harder to play. For other 3B replacements, Runmei, Silverwolf and Cypher are great choices. Silverwolf actually really exceeded my expectations even if it's Cypher S1. Among these three, I believe Silverwolf is the best if you're playing off element or brute forcing, followed by Cypher and then Runmei all at E0 S1. Although DPS teams, Jingliu can also actually somewhat work with Casteris. Each Dragon Breath actually gives Jingliu one extra instance of Moonlight, so combined with Hyacinth S1, Jingliu is almost always on max synergy. Jingliu plus Blade should also have decent synergy, but in my testing, running hypercarry teams still yield the best results, so I guess it's more of a fun little thing you can consider. Just a little gameplay tip, you can actually get 2 stacks of synergy at once. In general, I think you kind of want to know how many stacks of Moonlight you have, so you don't overcap, but for some weird reason, if you are transforming into the transmigration state, it can only give you a maximum of 1. Here I have about 20 stacks, and if I use my skill, I should get 1 from the talent, but also 1 from 20 Moonlight, meaning my total should be 4 stacks, but I still only get 3, so I don't really know if this is a bug or not, but it works perfectly fine during the transmigration state. Finally, I have a bunch of Jingliu Showcases, and I'm not super sure if I should voice over or use subtitles like I can normally do. Let me know by the way. But anyways, enjoy.